Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to a Newcastle Noir special, hosted by Honey and Stag, and with the fabulous support of Quercus Books. Anybody who is connected with Newcastle Noir will know that unfortunately this year we haven't been able to gather, but all of us at Newcastle Noir were really keen to at least leave a mark on 2021 with the idea of looking forward to our next festival that we might be able to organise. If you are familiar with Newcastle Noir, you will be aware how much crime writing, both home but also outside the UK, means to us. We really enjoy being able to bring authors from around the world to the Northeast, to Newcastle. And so this Eurocrime panel is our way of celebrating that. Now, when I introduce the authors, you might question and say, Dr. Noir, Eurocrime, really, in the strictest sense of the word? Well, let's talk fluidly and let's look at those European connections that we might find amongst our authors this evening. But our main reason for being here is to celebrate a debut novel that has just come out into the world. And I would love to welcome the author of that debut novel, Christian Unge, into the studio.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, and many congratulations on the publication of your first crime thriller novel, because it's not your first publication at all. That publication, I have my copy. It's a glorious book, Hell and High Water. How does it feel to be here this evening, knowing that you gave literary birth to this glorious piece of writing?
It feels wonderful, and I'm so happy to see the book because I haven't had it in my hands yet, so I'm a bit jealous.
It is beautiful. You love it.
Well, but it's a big day for me to be out in English, because this book came out in Sweden 2 years ago, and since then I've written 2 more books in this series. So, but I knew the book was going to come out in England. 3 books coming out in England from the beginning, and then I've just been waiting for this day, because I have cousins, for example, in Lausanne.
Mm-hmm.
Very close to Joël, the other author here today, one of the other authors, and they haven't been able to read my books yet, because they came out in Polish and Dutch, etc. But now English is such a worldwide language.
Yeah. I love the thought of that an author's book can travel so far, because of that. So many congratulations on that, and you have thrilled me. I haven't even needed to ask you, will there be more of this character that you've created? Will there be more? You've told me that already. So for those viewers and listeners who who get their hands or get their ears on Christian's book, just know that there's more of Teklaberg on the way. So that's wonderful.
Definitely.
Yeah, so to help us celebrate this evening, we have 2 other Quercus authors, critically acclaimed, award-winning authors. If you would welcome into the studio Derek B. Miller. Good. Hello, Derek. It's wonderful to see you. How's everything with you?
It's fine. I've got Joël right behind me, but you can't see him. But he's I guess he'll be here in a second. But wonderful. It's delightful to be here. I'm in Scandinavia too, although you wouldn't know it from the screensaver that I'm using, because Christian got the best one, obviously, with a little flickering fireplace and everything. It's really top notch.
But I do think your cushions there are rather something.
They are Swedish because they came from IKEA.
Oh, right.
So the bonds run deep, obviously.
Totally. And the book that I'd like to refer to, your book, the most recently published in the UK, Radio Life. So I will draw on some of those ideas with you, if that's okay, as we engage in our discussion this evening.
We are in your hands.
Bless you. Thank you. And our final guest this evening, as part of this celebration, is Swiss author Joël Dicker. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be with you. Even though I can't wait for the time soon enough, I hope that we'll be actually all together in the same room, because it's been probably, and same for you guys, my 200 Skype or Zoom or Teams or StreamYard and in some way it's fantastic. It's fantastic to think that book is really the thing. I don't know for the rest of the world, but I know in France, I know in Switzerland, it really keeps the people together. It really gather the people together through books, getting to bookshops, which were in France and Switzerland the very first shops to be able to open again. And I felt very strong. I saw it as a very strong signal of the power of books. And here again, when it's very difficult for everybody to have shows and festivals and a lot of things which we understand, books again were able through Skype and Zoom to live their own life. And I think it's a wonderful thing. It's great.
It is, and I'm very grateful to the three of you that we can do this. It will do for now until we can safely be together. And I do like the way that this can reach people all over the world. I think that's one of the maybe positive aspects that's come out of our experiences in life. To all the people who are watching us, if you have any questions for the authors, please do feel free to put those in the comments section. We'll take those as we go along. And also you'll see in our comments section, there are links there to the author's books that I've mentioned. I should say that Joël's book that we'll be making reference to, most recently published in the UK, is The Disappearance of Stephanie Mailer. So, good authors. I'd like to start by considering the moment of becoming an author, especially when you have professions, studies that might not have been initially the idea of being a thriller, a crime writer. Christian, you worked in hospitals in Stockholm and in Burundi, is that correct? Yeah.
I've been working for Doctors Without Borders in Burundi, Congo, and also did my PhD about HIV in Kenya for 5 years. So
yeah. So a world outside crime and thriller writing, in a way.
Yes.
Derek, international relations, is that correct? Is that the background?
Yeah, I was. I also had this parallel life. I did my doctorate in international relations, master's in national security, and worked at the UN for about 10 years, among other things. But I mean, once Joël goes through, it's not necessarily a transition. It's something you're doing while you're doing other things, and then suddenly somebody cares. It's more like that. But I will hand it over, please, or this way. That way.
Yeah, I agree with Derek. I think anything that is not related to book when you're an author is feeling your author's mind. And I think that the more you're away from the literature world and the books world and anything related to. I think the more you go, the further you go, the better then you can go back to your book, because you have this, I don't know how to say, but this kind of bubble around your book, because you come back to your work, you go back to your laptop late at night, early in the morning, in between the work hours, and you're really committed to it. And also, I think that the time is something so precious, especially when you have a work, you have kids, you have a life around, that you need to make these hours. You need to be able to save and to find some times to write. And there's not a lot of time. We all know, like, days are very short. There's a lot of stuff to do. And so every hour that you get to write, it really means it, and you need to focus on it. And I really believe, especially for me now that don't really have a job aside, and I really, most of my days is committed to books. I keep trying to have other things to be able to have this feeling of, I can't wait to go back to my work, to my book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the what drives you, that passion that's there. So Christian, to come back to Hell and High Water, it's today that we can open the copy of that 19th of August 2021 in the UK. But how long has this been in the making, and when was that moment in your life when you said, or as Derek said, it's that thing that just seems to happen, and then somebody cares and wants to know. So when did this happen for you?
Okay, do I have 2 or 3 hours? I don't know.
Yeah.
I picked the short version. Okay. It relates to what you said about having something to write about. For me, it's been really important to be a medical doctor all the way. I am currently working 50-60% of my time as a doctor. And it started when I was doing research about HIV in Kenya. I was working at the time for Doctors Without Borders, first in Burundi and Congo, and I was writing short stories to my friends and family about my experiences in the field when working in Burundi. And they said, you have to write more, it's interesting with the patients. Okay, and I came home, I wrote a small book about my experiences, nobody wanted to publish it. But I eventually wanted to write a book about the slums in the world, because my PhD was about adherence to HIV medicines in these slum areas in Nairobi. And I started writing a documentary about slums of the world. But I noticed that I needed a character, I needed a surgeon who guided me in this story, and it became more and more fiction. And eventually I ended up, when we were having my first daughter 14 years ago, writing this first thriller about this surgeon working in Kenya and HIV and stuff. So it was fiction. I couldn't write full documentary, but then I wrote 3 more books about this surgeon. And in each book, I wanted to have some kind of theme. So it was about the pharmaceutical industry, and one book was about the Congo, the Belgian dark history in Congo, etc. So I wanted a theme for every book. And that, when I started, I wanted to come home to Stockholm, writing fully 100% about this medical world of Tekla Berg, which is coming out today, this first book. And I wanted to create a fictive hospital, the Nobel Hospital, because I didn't want to take the Karolinska Hospital. It's a famous hospital with a Nobel Prize, etc. So I wanted to have some kind of liberty or freedom to so I put her in this fictive hospital, and then I use my world as a medical doctor to meeting of the patients. For me, each time I come to the ER, tomorrow I'm going to work and I'm going to meet patients coming with, if Derek comes with the abdominal pain and some strange lab tests, for me that's a clue. It's like a criminal investigation that I'm studying. So I see so many parallels to what crime technicians and police people are doing when they have a crime scene. So I'm thrilled every time I go to the ER, almost every time. And I try to bring this, curiosity about diagnostics, patients, to solve the puzzle. when writing about Tekla. And then, of course, I take her into a bit bizarre situations, and you need some bad guys. I put in the Uzbeki mafia, etc. So, but I dig from this well of mine from my work as a doctor, and it's important. I couldn't stay 24 hours. I couldn't work as an author full time. Then I wouldn't have anything to write about because I'm not that sort of inventive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing about the process of getting to this point. Writing, as they often say, writing what you know, so set within that medical context. But Joël, if we think about the disappearance of Stephanie Mailer, you're based in Geneva, but you write in the States. It is a fictional town that you've set this story in, yeah?
Absolutely. And yeah.
Why the United States? I mean, why not Geneva? What was it in this process, this creative process, that you feel drawn, to create those stories around a society elsewhere?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say something that might sound a bit stupid, if I may say so. But the thing is, it took me a lot of time to realize that I wanted to write a novel, and I'm speaking about fiction. I wanted to write a novel because I love to read novels. And what I love when I read, it's the feeling of living a different life of mine. It's really the word fiction is it really means that you're going to discover something that is not yours, that is not your life. It's not the city you live in. It's not about you. It's about something else. And I love how people, when they read books, they can be on the bus, they can be on the subway, they can be in a hospital room, for instance, and they're able to escape where they are. They're able to escape their worries or their own life because of the books. And that's, I think, really the beauty of the books. That is something so much stronger than Netflix or TV, because you, as a reader, you are creating your own world. And that's something absolutely amazing. And it can work all over the world. When you're watching a movie, you're set in front of your TV and you just have to follow what is shown to you. When you read a novel, it's way stronger because you are deciding of what will happen. You are seeing the character the way you want to see it. And I strongly believe that in a novel, the one who has the power, it's not the author, it's the reader. Because as an author, you can spend dozens of pages trying to describe a place or a character. If the reader, as is reading it, sees it differently, the reader wins. And I love this. All to say that it took me a long time to find out about this. And I wrote a few novels, 5 or 6 novels. They were all set in Geneva. And they were all kind of about me, about my life, about Geneva. And I had a very hard time to create this distance between I, Joël, and I, the protagonist of the book. And I was like, but how can I get into fiction? And it happened to me like this. One day I was like, but I should set this story somewhere else. And it needs to be somewhere I know very well, because it needs somewhere that I can describe very easily with my own words. It cannot be something artificial that I will go on Google Maps, on books, and try to describe a country I've never been to. But it happens to me that I've spent a lot of time on the East Coast because I have cousins that lives there, and I've been spending all my summers for my first 20 years of life, or 25 years of life. I've been going to Maine for like 2 months in a row. So I've never really lived in the States. I've never really lived a life. I not work in the States, never paid taxes in the States, never has war in the States. It was only vacation time, very enjoying times. And so all of a sudden I decided, after 6 novels based in Geneva about kind of me, I decided to create this distance between me, Joël, and the characters of the novel. And I wrote, that was my very first big novel. It was set in the States, and it was not about the States. It was really about being able to create this distance between me and create the fiction. And I really enjoyed it, because when I was going back to my book, and at that time I was working in Geneva at the Parliament, it was a very boring job and I was not really happy at it. But every time I had a break, I had 20-minute break, I would go in a room, close the door, and go back to my book, which was meaning to me, I'm going back to the States. and I'm going back to this special place to me. I'm going back to Maine, which is, for me, it's filled with very enjoyable and great feeling of being so happy with my cousin there. And I think that was the first experience I had. And since this, 3 more novels in the States, and the very last one, finally, I think I was able to make it in Geneva after 3 books in the States. But the last one is not available in English yet.
Not yet, but hopefully it will be. Okay, so writing fiction, that idea of it goes totally against the grain of, in a way, write what you know, and write that distance right away, get the reader to travel. And I think, Derek, in all fairness, I think tonight's prize must go to you for that, in getting the reader to travel with your novel, your last novel. And you set it in a dystopian future. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I guess if we're traveling through time, that's certainly the case. I'm going to do something radical, though.
Go on, be radical. We like it.
which is I'm going to do something which might be new in novels, which I'm not going to talk about myself for a second, because because I'm just listening to these 2 guys. Yes, my new book is Radio Life. It's fantastic. Please buy it. Meanwhile. Christian, I want to ask you a question about what you were talking about, because you work for Médecins Sans Frontières. You're in Burundi. You've lived in the east coast of Africa for a long time. Your work is serious, right? It is serious-minded. It's science-based. It's empirical. It is emotional, certainly for the people around you. And so, yes, I accept the obvious transition of, yes, there's investigation around me. Yes, that's how the mind works and the rest. But you now have to take all that experience and intellectually, all that is sound. But how do you go from all of that to making the move into drama? Because we're talking about the step into drama, to dramatize, to step into dialogue, to create problems rather than solve them. Otherwise, there's no book, right? So there's some whimsy. I only got about 1/3 of the way through the book. Joël, same with you, because I'm packing and I'm moving next week, and I literally don't even have any books, including mine, behind me. Although obviously I'll finish them. So my question to you is, that transition from sort of the hard science, hard life into the whimsy of drama, as serious as it is, what was that transition? Where did that come from? It had to come from somewhere.
It's a good question. I would answer it like this. There are two answers to that. First, I think working in a hospital is a big drama in itself. As I said many times, my ordinary work is a drama, and the hospital is such a good sort of compact world in itself. You've both seen ER or Grey's Anatomy or some TV series. You have so many people in a small space working together with serious stuff, as you say, and you can put so much tension into all these situations between people. But when I created Tekla and this book that you started to read, I wanted to create this. This is sort of just the world she's living in, because she's a doctor, and of course I want to write. It's easy for me to write about the medical world because I know it. But then I put in all these other elements into her world. In the second book, she's not very much in the third book now that I just finished, she's not very much in the hospital. She's in other parts of Sweden. It's much more about her family life, family story. So of course, I don't know how far you've gotten, but I have side stories about the gangster world in Stockholm, which is now escalating, unfortunately, with a lot of crime. Young people shooting each other to death in the streets of Stockholm. So I bring all other elements, not all, but some other crime elements into this Tekla, the world of Tekla. But the hospital and her medical world is just sort of the background noise where she's living. And then I have sort of one theme for every book. The other book has more sort of a cold case element to it. So is that answering your question?
Yeah, so if I can dive in on that one, and just carry on a little bit about Tekla. So you have her coming from Jämtland. She's not originally from Stockholm. It's not her city. Yeah. Of all the provinces in all of Sweden, do you stick a pin in the map and go for Jämtland? You know, because I was reading between Norway and Sweden, this area has gone back and forth. Is there some significance in Jämtland for you?
It's just that I love the winter in Sweden. I love the northern parts much more than the southern parts. I've been living in the northern parts. Joël said he's been living in Maine, and in the summertime. I mean, it's much easier to pick the surroundings, the environment that you know by heart. So I've been more to northern parts of the I love the winter, I love the harshness of the northern nurse, people living up north. I can identify much more with them.
Were you there as a kid?
No, I was working. You know, you do your internship as a doctor. I was living there for 2 years in the northern parts of Sweden.
Well, it's interesting because it's what Joël was saying. You know, Joël, because I spent summers in Maine as well, and you know, and it had a huge impact on me. And I've also set a novel there, and you know, and this sort of thing. But it's interesting though when you're young, you are an adventurer. You are. You know, it's a kind of de Tocqueville sort of experience, right? And so you're going over there, maybe not with a mission, you know, maybe not, you know, on a budget, but, you know, sometimes we forget that, like, you know, when de Tocqueville went to the United States and he wrote Democracy in America, he was only there for 6 months and he was only 26 years old, little shit. And, you know, so, you know, but the freshness, the intensity of what is new and what comes at you and what you hold on to, that's very, very visceral. I think Fee did. And I'm not at all surprised that you tried writing about, because I didn't know that. I was listening to your story. I'm not at all surprised that you tried writing about where you're from and who you are and found yourself wanting. It was dull. It didn't work. It didn't. And it's not personal. I mean, as a writer.
You know, I agree with you.
And then stepping out to where there was something magical had happened to you, you know, and it's a good place, Maine, because there's a lot of magic there. I think Stephen King is still drawing from it, right? But I can understand how much you can pull out of a place like that. And, you know, so anyway, it was just.
I agree with you.
Can I ask you, Derek, a question? I just started your book, Radio Life, and I just want to throw it out. I'm amazed by your language. I love the way you write, and the opening parts are bringing me back to my favorite book of life, Cormac McCarthy's The Road.
Oh, so, boy! Well, there's a compliment. I mean, thank you and good night.
I really got some goosebumps when I started reading it. I haven't I have much left, but I wanted to ask you because I really love dystopias, TV fiction books. And I had this, you know, dream about writing something, create a whole different kind of world. I create my small world within the hospital world, but it's sort of semi documentary, semi-new. But you have created something totally new. How did you get there? How long time did it take? What do you have other, you know, perhaps you don't want to talk about it, but do you have other like cities, countries in the back of your mind when you create this world? I think it's amazing.
I had. Thank you for saying that. It's very kind. I read The Road in 2 sittings. I should have read it in 1, but life interfered. But it was that kind of a book, and I agree with you. And I think with Radio Life, I had questions on my mind that I thought that only through science fiction and setting it in this post-apocalyptic but debatably dystopian environment was the only way that I could tell that particular story. And I was very curious right now about issues of remembering and forgetting, and not just truth and lies, but very briefly, there was a 2012 documentary called Side by Side, and it was shot at a time when the film industry was transitioning really from film, proper, film to digital. And the technology was still, okay. They'd shot a few things on it, but it wasn't where it is now. And there was a big debate about it. And one of the things, and Keanu Reeves was narrating it, and interesting people like Scorsese and George Lucas and other people were in it. Anyway, long story short, at the end of it, there was a big debate about the future of what's going to happen with all this digital film now that we're going to transition. And what had never occurred to me was that there was a real fear that all of it's going to be lost, because none of it actually exists. It's not an artifact. It's not a thing, right? You have LPs and CDs and tapes because we're adults, and I'm not going to use the word old, but there's stuff lying around. I have a map in my house. But all of that, all our photos, our music, our books, our maps, our everything can ostensibly go into the cloud. So which is not a cloud, which is actually a giant data center. So what happens when the power goes off? Like, for real. And so there was a book written in 1959 called A Canticle for Leibowitz. And it's worth looking up. It won the Hugo Award. It's the only book he ever published. He had a very difficult life. He was involved in the bombing of Monte Cassino in World War II and whatnot. Anyway, it's a very good book. And he created this universe where there had been a nuclear war, and all the knowledge was lost, and because everything burned. But more than that, the people who survived blamed the scientists, and so they destroyed everything. So humanity went back to next to nothing. And I wanted to revisit that problematic, but to think about it in a new way. And then for central dramatic tension, one thing was on my mind is about this issue, as I said, of remembering and forgetting. And I'll wrap up here. But I'm Jewish, and so we're always told to remember this, remember that, remember everything. Okay, well, the thing about remembering is that remembering hurts, right? And so what then does forgetting look like? And to whom are we doing disservice? Is it to ourselves? Is it to the dead? What do we owe the dead? What is our relationship to that? What is the nature of the debt? I'm not going to answer these questions, but they create space for exploring kinds of dramatic problematics that are philosophical, but ultimately can land in life. Like, do we go look for the lost knowledge, or do we leave it there because all this horrible stuff happened as a result? So it lands in how a society chooses to organize itself. And so with Radio Life, I created a universe where the people who survived, some of them want to rebuild the world, not necessarily as it was, but the idea is you can't get things done unless you know how to do them. And they used to know more than us. So let's go find out what they knew. And then there's another group of people that says, They did know more than us, and this was the result. So if you like flowers and sunsets and girls in summer dresses and horses running across the desert, then forgetting is the only way to ensure that we maintain what we have left. And in this way, you have two, I don't want to say equally compelling because I don't want to judge them, but you have two sensible responses to the apocalypse. And then you put them at odds with one another. And then you just see what breaks and see where it goes. And I really, really didn't know how it was going to all play out. But I mean, thank God, Joe Fletcher decided to publish it, because, breaking into sci-fi is impossible. It's in some ways even harder than crime fiction, because crime fiction has a larger crime and thriller have a larger segment of the readership. And so it's an even smaller one, but I've either done something wonderful and created this new space for me to work, or I've just shot a hole in my boat, and I'm enjoying the feeling of the water around my ankles as I sink. So I don't know. I don't know, but it's nice talking to you guys.
I think you should continue. I want to follow the keepers.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I really appreciated the way that you don't go down on either side and say this is the way, this is how we should be, but there's on both sides aspects that we should consider. And here we are at times of one side or the other. Things aren't black and white.
Well, I mean, I saw, Joel, you were doing this. You're doing this in your new book by changing first-person perspectives in the structure of the novel. I mean, and that's, so you're bringing out different ways of storytelling through the different characters you're doing. I mean, how'd you come on such a structure like that?
Well, the idea at first is I really wanted to write a book based on the characters, and I really wanted to give the readers an actual way or their way for the readers, but to get deeply into the characters. And it was for me very, very important, because I had the feeling that in my previous books before that, I was not really able to really tell about the characters. It was more about the story, it was more about the plot, it was more about what's happening in the story. And for me, it was very important to try to switch that. And it's funny, because in the end, I'm not even sure it's really a crime novel. Because of course there's a crime, there's an investigation, and in the end of the book, what's happened and who did what. But actually, there's so many things that are not related to resolving the murder, and it's difficult to exactly know what's a crime story, because some people would say a crime story, well, there's a crime news story, so here's the crime story. And on the other hand, there are some very avid reader of crime novel that will say, no, crime novels needs to apply to certain rules and follow certain rules. And one of these rules is like the book itself needs to be around the resolution of the murder. And every time the plot goes somewhere else and it's not useful to solve the murder, well, it's not really a crime story. So I've been battling a bit about this, because sometimes I'm saying it's not a crime story because I don't want to lie or to cheat on the avid crime readers. And on the other hand, if I say it's not a crime story, some people say no, it is a crime story. So for me to answer that, it's a book about people, and I think that's what books are about, because in the end we don't really care about, or we do a little care about what happened in the story and who was the murderer, but in the end we want to understand why. And that's why I really like what you say about actually what is deeply inside us and where are we going to, and where are we heading to, especially now. What's the purpose, what's the journey, and what's the responsibility behind that. And I think that's what a book can do. It cannot answer these questions, but it can at least try to raise some kind of answer that will be different for every reader, of course, but it is very, very important question, especially right now, that people needs to start to ask themselves and ask what they want to do and what role they want to play in the coming world.
Yeah, and I think even, if we look at Christian's book, if we go back to Hell and High Water, that idea of what place do we play in the world, and that central character, and all that she is blessed with, both positive and negative, that question, I think, is in there in that protagonist. What role am I playing, and what am I doing, within the hospital and without? And I just wonder, Christian, in your medical profession, and then outside that, have you found yourself in some of those situations that Tekla finds herself in, of making those difficult decisions?
Yes, I have, and I come back to what Derek asked about how to put in drama into this world, and I feel it's for me it's a no-brainer in a way, because there are so many dramatic elements in the hospital environment. You don't have to go to Africa to work for Doctors Without Borders. Of course, that can be very dramatic, but during this COVID epidemic now, I mean, I'm a bit tired. If I look tired, it's because I'm really tired after working now 1.5 years with high dependency unit patients. I mean, the patients not really coming to the ICU, but really, really sick and needing oxygen and a lot of technical stuff. And what I and my colleagues are struggling so much about is not only the first equipment and how to treat these patients, but it's also extremely hard ethical dilemmas we're facing on a daily basis. Is this 68-year-old patient with kidney failure, heart failure, and liver failure gonna survive intubation and ventilator in the ICU? And the ICU doctor in the emergency room says no. And I say, well, this patient just went bicycling for 20 miles 1 week ago. He has 3 kids. This is a human being. Why don't we give it a shot? I understand it's a 50-50 chance. And then it comes down to beds in the hospital, ICU beds, and whether or not the ICU doctor is in a good mood or something. There's so many factors bring it to an extremely dramatic and sometimes very frustrating and hard situation. Yes.
But Christian, I guess if I was going to make the comparison more stark, it would work like this. Because the topics you're dealing with are very serious, you could spend your free time, I will use air quotes as much as I find those annoying. So you could be writing peer-reviewed articles, you could be setting up clinical studies, you could be applying for funding to do all of what you might be doing, by the way. You could be, using your experience in order to try to find new patterns from practitioner point of view in order to change hospital procedure. I mean, this is just stuff off the top of my head, and I'm not even a doctor. So what I'm saying is that there are plenty of ways for you to blow your time. And yet what you've decided to do is go home and play around in the arts, right? And literally dramatize, these things. And to me, that is not an obvious move. I mean, that is not what most people, sane people who have your job, go do. And so that move, it's not that the existence of the drama isn't there and that you could make use of it. Yeah, I get that. But most soldiers don't write novels, right?
But first of all, I do research. I write my papers. I know I do that stuff.
All right. So you waste your time doing that too. All right.
and that, no, but it's the serious answer is that who will read? I've done my PhD. I do research now within the sepsis subject. But if I publish a sepsis article from the COVID epidemic now, what, 50 people will read this article, or 20? And I put, hundreds of hours into this. And if I want to, reach a broader audience, well, I write fiction. And, I mean, you guys, you have really serious themes you just talked about that you want to, discuss and bring out to the world. Derek, you could also write an article about the subjects you just told us.
Yeah,
or
I did.
Jewish, heritage, whatever. Yeah, but then if you use fiction, you can create this world. It's an interesting story to read. And you can also bring all these themes into the book, and you can at the same time reach a much broader audience.
Yeah.
So that's why I write. I just told you I started writing documentaries, but I was drawn into this fictive world. But I really put in a third in my books. A third in my books are serious subjects I want to discuss. But the harsh, the sad truth is that when you sit in discussions like this is a very intellectual discussion, but most of the time when you're interviewed as a fictive crime author, they ask you about the characters, the crime, etc. But you have a theme that you wanted to evolve or discuss, and those themes are many times, I think, put aside because now we're talking fiction. So,
well, yeah, I mean, and Joël, I was wondering, because you were talking about the amount of writing that you did prior to sort of your first success, which I think a lot of us had that similar kind of experience. But it sounds like the longer you do this, because you have three novels out. Is that right?
I have 5 novels published.
Oh, geez,
and 5
I'm so
before.
sorry.
No, don't worry.
No, but it's But I mean, what my question though remains the same. Though I'm sorry about my facts, which is
Who's counting?
as you're maturing as a writer, though, as you're maturing as in your own experience of moving along, and you've had enough success so that you have a bit of freedom to be able to maneuver. Now you're not terrified that they're going to pull the plug. It sounds like you're drifting towards what we're all talking about, which is these larger thematic issues, the drama, the interaction. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but at least that's what it sounded like from what you were describing.
Yeah.
As opposed to the plot.
Yeah, but also the thing is, and it was maybe the difficulty for me because my first success was actually my 6th novel. So it happened like it took me a little while in some sense, but I was quite young at the time. I was 26 years old. It was 10 years ago.
Oh. What happened to him? Where did he go? Is it the fact that he mentioned how young he was when he got that first? We don't want to hear it. Hopefully he can be back. Yeah, I really hope he does. Because this
is the answer.
or is it a bit like an Agatha Christie novel, and then there were 2, and oh no, here he comes. He's coming back.
I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry about this.
We knew that you were 26, and then you were just gone.
Yeah, we thought it's because you mentioned age.
No, so I was saying that I was 26, and for me, the concern at the time, it was like, but how can I take the time? Because at 26 years old, you're still very young in your mind, and I knew that I had to wait a little time to experience things. And in the meantime, and I know now because then 26, then life goes on. Then I became a father for the first time. Now for the second time a few months ago, and this is when you really shift. And for me, the difficulty was to be able to wait and to take the time I needed to shift slowly and to get in touch with my feelings, what I wanted to express. And I think that's the difficulty. Christian, you were saying it's so right that being an author is not about writing fiction. It's about having the opportunity of having a voice, and you don't want to talk about your opinion. You want to use this voice to make other people talk. You want to use this voice to have an echo in the reader's mind for these readers then to think, but yes, it's true, or what do I think about that? And that's the beauty of the literature. That's the beauty of books. It's not what you say, it's what you will awake in people's minds. But that takes time because you need to be in touch with what you want to say. It's not because you write books and because you have an audience that all of a sudden you're going to speak about anything that you think it's important, because there's so many things that are important. You need to use this voice very consciously. You need to find the right words. You need to know where you are going to, and this takes years. And finally, I feel I'm getting to this voice. It took me 10 years, and it took me not only time, but also a lot of struggle and a lot of time to fight against myself, because I was feeling that my audience was asking for something different. They wanted me to pass this new version, Joël 2.0. But I was trying to explain, like, because another book in the States, a second book in the States, also a crime novel, and people would say, well, it's a bit like quite the same. And I'm like, but guys, I'm only 1 year older from the previous book. Give me time. In French, we have an expression that say we cannot go further than on peut pas aller plus vite que la musique. We cannot be too fast. Yeah, we can't be too fast, because there's a time for everything. And I think especially for authors, we need to take the time that we feel, and it's about ourselves and what we feel.
Joël, if I can come in on that, because I think there's a really difficult point with that, and it's the publishing industry, and all due respect to those, publishers, but if there is a demand from readers and publishers that says on a yearly basis you will produce a novel, but what if that finding that message, what you're wanting to relay, and not just a formulaic piece of writing, what if that takes longer? How do you, as authors, and this is to all of you, how do you stand against those pressures that want you to be producing on a regular basis?
Well, you need to take the time. I can only speak on my behalf, but I never work with a contract, so to avoid to have a deadline. So it could be for my different novels. Sometimes it was 2 years between the two, but sometimes 3. And what is it? My concern is not to take the time. Is what if it's shorter? What if all of a sudden within 6 months I write a book? How do you trust the process? And it's still a question that I wonder. It's still a question I ask myself quite often, is how you make the difference between your fear of not being good enough, fear of losing your audience, and your guts, which is what really drives you in the end. It's your guts. I know this is it, but the difference between the fear and the gut, sometimes it's not easy to get it.
Thank
Christian,
you.
you're
Yeah, but I just want to say, Joël had a really good point there about not writing under a contract. It depends on if you have to live on your, how to say, if this is your work, and you have a publisher that wants you to write a book. But what I did last year was that between these crime novels, I wrote a book about my father who died in cirrhosis related to alcohol, and I didn't want any publishing house to be involved in the process. So I wrote the book, and I had a friend who is an editor, who was sort of my, he read some stuff and gave me some feedback, but I wanted it to be just my book, and then I handed it to a publisher when it was done. Really in the end, and I got some feedback. I changed the publisher then, but that it was a really nice process, not writing under contract, as Joël said. If you have the luxury to do that, I mean, that's not everybody who can do it. I mean, I work as a doctor. I have a salary, so but it gave me a really, really nice freedom, I said.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my life in that sense is more like Joël's, because what I do is I just write a book, and then I give it to my agent, and my agent, with trepidation, reads it and then figures out what the hell I've done this time, and then we discuss it, and I say, what do you think? Obviously, but I don't. you know, I don't even talk to my wife very much about what I'm writing. I mean, I'll mention that there's something on my mind about the bombing of Monte Cassino in 1943, and I feel that there's a story there. I can't figure out why, but I'm going to start. And she's like, whatever. If it keeps you off drugs, do whatever you want. You know, I mean, I think that's the basic attitude. You know, so. And then a book appears, and then I talk to my agent. My agent and I figure out what to do with it, and then I make the relevant changes. I always write it. It's going to be 2 or 3 times, and then when it settles, it's ready to go to my publisher, and then we try and sell it. It's really that's it. And so, you know, the pressure is internal. Ewa Sherman. That's a W. It's the Abbey of Monte Cassino. It was established by Saint Benedict in 529 AD, south of Rome. Obliterated in 1944 in February by the Allies. Long story. Won't go into it, but lots there. So that's it for me, and I find it's the only way to do it. Otherwise, if I don't just sit down and do what I want to do, think it through, write my book, it won't be. I don't have any other way of doing it. It's not, and I'm past the point of thinking about it.
Go on, Christian.
Sorry, perhaps we're running out of time, but I had a question, totally different question for Joël, if it's okay.
Totally.
Is it true that you have been one of your books have been made into a TV series or a film?
Yeah,
movie?
yeah, yes, it is. TV show, yeah. Yeah, it's true.
How does it feel? What was the process? And were you involved in the process? Are you satisfied with the result? Sort of. Long story.
Yeah, well, the process was. The process was pretty fun, but first of all, I was very, from the beginning, I would say I was very enthusiastic about an adaptation. I was not worried about it. I was not worried because I knew a book is a book, a movie is a movie, and I still have people that will come to me and say, I read the book, I liked it, but I don't want to watch the TV show because I'm afraid it won't be like the book. And I was like, of course it won't be like the book because it's not a book, it's a TV show. It's like if you go to a restaurant and you ask for a piece of fish and you tell the waiter, I hope it will taste like beef. No, it's not beef, it's fish. Fish is fish, beef is beef. But I think books and TV shows, it's exactly it. So I was not fearing something that will be not the book because it was not the book. And it can sound very naive to say that, but I think it helped me a lot because I was very easygoing with it. What was very important for me was to be set in the States because the book was set in the States, and the setting, the era, the East Coast, New England was something very. It was like a character of the book. So for me, it was very important for the story to be set in the States for this reason. That's the only thing I've asked, and then I really just enjoyed. Working with the director, even though I was never involved because I told the director, like, I'm not going to teach you how to make a movie or TV show. I don't have the experience, but I gladly assist you through the process just to see it. And so we had this very easy relationship where he was, in the end, asking me a lot of questions, and I really participated a lot, but not because it was in the contract, but because we had this relationship with a lot of trust between us, and that was very nice. And so I spent a lot of time on the set. I spent almost half of the filming was like 6 months. I spent 3 or 4 months on set, and the very first weeks, all the crew was very worried because they were like, "Oh my God, the author is on set." And I think they had a pretty bad experience of it because the other would stop the filming.
Did you have a little jacket that said author on the back? Like
nobody knew. But then the show was like very easygoing. I was very enthusiastic because for me, I was easygoing with the process. Plus, it was very I mean, I like it was a lot of fun for me to see the book getting reality, having like actual people, even though it's actors, but telling the lines of the book, and that was really pleasant. Not as an ego boost, not about that. It's really about really being able to be in the head of one of the reader, because it's just an adaptation. So it's not, the TV show is not the truth about what you need to see in the book. It's just being able to see what one reader, the director of the TV show, saw, and that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Although I don't know if you've seen the comment, Joël, from Kirsten McKenzie, and she said just as long as they didn't change the ending in the series.
Yeah, and why not? And why not? Because again, you need to be able to understand that what you are going to see, even though you read the book, is not going to be the book, because the book as a reader, the book is yours. The truth of how are the character, the description of the people, description of the set, it's yours. It cannot be different because you imagined it the way you decided. So everything can be changed in the end, I think.
I'm just thinking, forgive me for thinking this, but you're talking about adaptation of your work, and I am lifting it up to the heavens, or we're hoping that we get a Teckleberg on our screens, because I think she lends herself very much to adaptation. I am aware of the time, you amazing, fabulous authors, and to everybody who's joined us this evening. I want to say thank you so much for being here, and the comments. I know people have enjoyed listening to our authors, and with the motive of celebrating you, Christian, and your publication. I want to thank Quercus Books as well for enabling us to put such a fabulous group of authors together, and Kelly Lacey for holding us together technologically. Derek, Joël, Christian, thank you so much. And when the time is right, I long to actually meet you face to face in real life, and to continue our conversations, because Derek, we have to talk about Trivial Pursuit, or trivia as it's called elsewhere. But for now,
it's an excellent way to structure a new civilization.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Nod. Thank you, all of you.
All the very best.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much for being.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.